This is the Big Cat here with Coach Andrew Giniat, winner of the 2023 Steamboat Blue Course. And that's what we're talking about today. The race is coming up, and we are going to share our coaching advice with you all. And we're specifically going to focus on the first 21 miles of this course, where it's hard and it's tricky. And we got Andrew here to give us the skinny of how you should approach it. What's going on, Andrew?
Not too much, Frank. Just living the dream, dealing with the heat. I think probably the same as a lot of our listeners right now.
It's hot, everyone. Yeah, real hot. Listeners, if you've done the Steamboat Blue course before and you're doing it again, this is going to resonate. If you're new to the Blue course, listen carefully, because the first 21 miles of this race are climbing. It gets thin, the gravel road. It's like a 2-track. There's some descents. There's a right way and a wrong way to approach this first hour, essentially. And then how you approach the first hour is going to determine how the rest of the race goes. Andrew, you want to tell us about the 3 climbs and then how they factor and they make one long climb in the first 21 miles?
Yeah. So let me start off by saying that when I'm looking at my file right now, the first, I want to say 10 miles of the race are just going to be super, super fast.
Mm-hmm.
This is like almost like road race style, kind of pack handling sort of dynamics. My average speed was 22.7 miles an hour, which is super fast for a gravel race. It was obviously going much faster than this at times. So in this portion of the race, nothing is going anywhere, right? You're just kind of navigating the pack, trying to stay as forward as you can while being as efficient as you can. And then the section that Frank is referring to is from about mile 10 to mile 22. And when you look at this on the profile, it looks like one big continuous climb, but it's really not. Like, I would describe this as like a stair-stepper climb, meaning that you're doing repeated, 4 to 6 minute climbing efforts separated by like shorter, maybe 2 minute recoveries. So that's sort of what's happening at that point in the course. And this is a really critical moment, because at mile 22, you're going to get a big descent. And that big descent sort of serves to lock you into where you are in the race. So if you've made the front group, you're sitting on the back, you're chilling out, you're recovering. If you're 2 minutes off of that lead group, you're probably not going to catch, because you're both just going the same speed. You're not going to go 35 miles an hour while they're going 30 miles an hour. And if you're in my situation, you were far up, you were near the front, but I dropped my chain on the descent, which is absolutely worst case scenario, because while the guys ahead of you are going 30, you're going 0. And I did link up with a couple of, I want to call them hanger-oners, people who had just kind of missed out on that front group. And we were able to get back on, but that moment was super critical. And like, we had to go as hard as we can for a very short period.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll ask you how hard you're going and what your watts per kilogram in a second, but describe it in just descriptive terms. So starting at like mile 10, you're going to do these 5-minute climbs, 4 to 6 minutes, as Andrew said. And then when you crest each one, there's some descending and it gets really strung out. And my coaching advice to you is really stick with the effort over the top of the climb, so you carry speed on the descent and you can maintain whatever group you're in. And if you become detached, which 93.5% of the field does, because what was when you won that year, what size of the group was it that crested over the 21 miles? Like a group of 30, you said?
Yeah. Maybe a little bit smaller than that. So like 20 to 30 people out of how many people do the SBT Blue Course, Frank? Do you know? Like
500,
hundreds and
600.
hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the point is, and I'm not trying to be negative here, but just about everybody gets dropped here. And so you're going to go, that's what you need to prepare yourself for. You're going to go hard. You're going to get dropped, but it's not over. It's not like a road race where you're out of the peloton. That's like really when the race begins and how you handle this. And that's the purpose of this training tip. The way that we want to describe it as, you're going to go over this climb, you're going to descend. If you can descend in confidence, stay out of trouble, you can find a wheel, get in a group, then you're going to do the next climb. Same things happen. It's going to be hard. People go off in front of you and so forth. And then you descend again. stay in a group. Really do your biggest effort to stay in a group, because after that third climb, you're going to descend for a brief period of time. And then I think you got 19, you got 2 more miles till the top. And if you can make it, set your mile marker, and really your point to get to your first milestone of the race is mile 22. That's the 22.5. Actually, if you look at the Strava file, that's where it crests out. And then from mile 22.5 to about mile 45, this is what Andrew is talking about. It's really fast, a lot of freewheeling. If you're in a group, you've just punched your ticket. But if you're not in a group, you got to either catch back up if you can see them, or wait for the group behind you and conserve your energy. So hope that made sense. Andrew, when you were doing those climbs, the 4 to 6 minutes ones, what kind of watts per kilogram were you doing?
Yeah, let's have a look here. So all of those climbs were in the 4.25 to like 4.5 watt per kilo range. So for me, that was around 300, 325 watts. And there's four of those, and they're each, as I said, 4 to 6 minutes in length.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the distinct thing to remember here, though, is that maybe you can do, 4.5 watts per kilo for 5 minutes, no problem. Even at altitude, that would be fantastic. But you're doing these efforts sort of back to back, and they're sort of stacking up on top of you. So I almost think of this as like if you're doing like threshold or like super threshold efforts with like insufficient recovery between them, you're sort of pacing the first effort for the fourth effort, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're also doing this in the first 20 miles of a race, and you have 80 more to go after this. And so not a lot of eating and drinking is going to happen in this 10 miles to 20 miles section. But after you hit 22, it's start fueling and get ready. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard was that 4.25 watts per kilogram for you?
I would consider this like an 8 out of 10 effort. So that's like the same way that I would pace like a longer threshold effort, but these are obviously shorter 4 to 5 minute efforts. And the way that I like to think about it is, and I see this a lot in race files, you're doing this like kind of just above threshold type effort is sort of how it should feel, where it doesn't necessarily feel sustainable in the long run, but it also doesn't feel like you're going too far underwater, right? So, I know that I'm riding at a pace that's a little bit hard, and then I'm not going to be able to sort of maintain for the whole race, but I'm still holding back, a good 20%, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because one, at altitude, you're just not going to recover as well. And two, this is, hour one of a 5-hour race.
Yeah.
So I'm going hard enough to ensure that I'm in the right position for me and kind of staying nearish the front, but not so hard that I'm going to pay for it later.
That's right. And so everyone, one of the purposes of producing this training tip for you all is because we've coached a lot of riders who've done this race, and we've seen it go both ways. Like, I have seen riders that are so motivated and so pumped up, they bury themselves in the first hour, and they like the wheels fall off 60 miles later. That's what we're trying to prevent you from doing. And so what Andrew is saying, by going about an 8 or a 9, even if you're doing well and you're feeling good, it's like pacing. You have a 100-mile time trial in front of you. And if you do a 10 out of 10 on these 4 efforts, it's not going to go well 3-4 hours later. And so you have to self-drop. And that's me personally. I get dropped here every year when I do this. This is where you get dropped section. I'm just saying, be ready for it. You got to feel it out. Of course, I'm trying to make the front group, but I'm also balancing out not exceeding what I can do for an hour. So try to maintain that 8 or 9 range on these 4 consecutive efforts. It'll pay dividends later on in the race.
Yeah, and one other thing that I'll add, Frank, and this is only like when I look at this file super carefully that I notice this, but for each of those 4 climbing efforts, and I think I just did this intuitively, I always made sure that I saved just a little bit of an acceleration for maybe the last 10 seconds going over the top of the climb.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that is because if you can bring a little bit more speed into that descent, you're going to slide past a lot of people if you have good descending skills and you can stay focused. You can pass 15, 20 guys, and then you enter the subsequent climb, 15, 20 wheels up. And those are 15, 20 wheels that you can kind of allow to kind of drift by you. So we call this sag climbing, right? So if you know what your watts per kilo are at altitude for these durations, and this sounds like a little bit more than you're willing to bargain for, there are some tricks you can use, if you listen to me here, to sort of maximize your position in the field for slightly less watts per kilo, right? And the way that we do that is we enter the climb as far forward as possible. We allow ourselves to drift back a little bit, but then going over the top, we've saved that one extra match, or half a match, however you want to think about it, to kind of just get ourselves back up to speed and make up ground on that descent.
Yes. Yeah. So if you remember one thing from this training tip, it's sag climb those 4 climbs to save a match to use later on in the race. And when you come over the final, not the final, but the mile 22.5, the end of the climbing, get in a group. That's absolutely critical after that.
Yeah. And I think another important thing that I want to share with our listeners is, again, that first 10 miles is going to be really fast and really exciting. You're going to be with 500 of your best gravel racing friends, and you're going to be ripping down the road. You're not getting away at this
Yeah.
point, and neither is anybody else, because nobody's just going to time trial away at 30 miles an hour at mile 5 of this gravel race. That doesn't mean that you can be complacent and be too far back in the field, but I think it's really important to not get overstimulated and kind of maintain some awareness of how hard you're going, because especially someone who doesn't spend a lot of time riding in a big group can easily get distracted and excited and look down and realize that they're doing 400 watts, right? And you need to not do this, because the critical moment sort of begins, like I said, around mile 10. That's when you're going to do your first effort, and you're not going to have to wonder what's happening. It's going to be really obvious. That's going to be sort of like the first of these kind of 4 to 6 minute climbs. Let the race come to you. Race the terrain. Don't worry about what people around you are doing. You of course need to be aware of your positioning, but the speed's going to drop and you're going to feel yourself. You're going to be climbing, and
It's hard.
that's your cue just to kind of ride a little bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're probably, yeah, you're going to have to ride a little bit harder than you want to ride, maybe. But as Frank and I have already discussed, do not go all out, especially on that first climb. You have time. You have 4 of those. That whole section from mile 10 to mile 22 took about 40 minutes. So I would say that, like, not a single one of those climbs, except for, the last little rise, is critical per se. You have time. And what you need to not do is freak out, right?
Yeah.
If you freak out and start burning matches, you're sort of digging your grave.
Yeah. Remember, this is a hard section, but from about mile 55 to 95 is even harder. So you got a lot of race coming to you, and it's really easy to blow yourself to bits in this first 22 miles. That's what we're cautioning you against. And what I would encourage everyone to do, I'm looking at the Strava Blue Course on Strava. I'm sorry, the Steamboat Blue Course on Strava. Download this to your bike computer, and then make sure you got a mileage marker, and you can track this, and that when you get to about mile 10, it's game on if you've never raced before. And then you can use the segment countdowns to know how far you have to the top of the climb, but you can also use the mile markers too. 22.5 is your mile to get to get a first significant bit of rest.
One other thing that I'll mention too for our listeners is that in years past, maybe 2 years ago, which was my first year at Steamboat, the year that I won in 2023, I remember the thing that we did, because it's super easy to do, it makes for like a nice shakeout ride, is we rode the finish backwards. So you ride a pavement stretch, and then you ride up Cow Creek and then back down it. That's like a technical kind of section of the course that's towards the end of the day. What I would recommend for people instead of doing that is, if you have time and you're willing to do a little bit of recon on your own, you can drive the first 10 miles of the course and then go and preview that section from mile 12 to mile 22. And we didn't do this on purpose. This is just sort of a happy coincidence, but you'll remember, Frank, we went out there to take photos.
Yeah.
And I would say that, like, sort of knowing what to expect with those sort of descents and those climbs is going to be really critical. I think that that's a more critical section to recon than that final, 10, 15 miles. Because at that point in the day, it's not that it's not important, but your fate is sort of already sealed.
Yeah.
Like,
You
your
are where
result
you are.
is sort of, you kind of are where you are at that point. So I would advise reconning this kind of stair-steppy section. It's going to feel longer and harder when you recon it, especially if you're on your own, because you don't have that big group to kind of suck you along. But it's still worth kind of seeing and sort of understanding the grades and just kind of the sequence of climbs. And it just goes to what Frank is saying about have like Climb Pro up on your Garmin, for example, so you sort of know how long the efforts are, when they're coming. I like to have these things actually memorized in advance because I oftentimes when I'm racing will work off of sort of visual cues, and I can say to myself like, okay, we just did climb 3. I know climb 4 is coming. I know where the end is, like it's up by that big barn. And that's really helpful for me and kind of puts my minds at ease versus the sensation of going up a climb and having no idea where it ends,
Yeah.
right? That's, yeah, that's torturous.
Wise words from the 2023 Steamboat Blue Course winner. Thank you very much, Andrew, for being here. And for listeners, good luck. I hope you're listening to this on like Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. And if you got any questions you want to ask us, we're available. We'll be out there and we'll be doing the same thing that we just talked about, sagging these climbs and conserving our energy for the latter half of the course. So hope everyone has a great race. Thanks for listening. And you know what to do. Work hard, ride fast, have fun. And as always, FTF. Pete.